So in my head, it was like, well, I'll outwork anybody. That's where the arrogance comes in, right? And I also thought that if I just created the best product possible, that it would basically sell itself. That's where the naivete comes in. And those two things got me in to the industry. And then once I was in it, like we were in it. I left a good paying job. So there was no fail.
Welcome back to the Liquid Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Monte Burrow. Today, I'm excited to have a gentleman with me, and he has a story that is as impactful as it is interesting. Today, I have the founder of Do Know It Social Spirits, Chris Montana. Chris, what's up, my friend?
Oh, not much, man. It's a good way to start the day. I'm glad to be here today.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we keep that same energy at the end. So I don't want you at the end of the saying, man, what the heck did I just get myself into?
No, it's all good. Talking about this industry, talking about spirits, like that's what I do for fun. So
Yeah, man. So we're gonna have a little bit of fun, get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about your story, and hopefully someone listening will learn a thing or two that may help them out. And if not, it will just have a fun ride regardless, right?
yeah, I'm here for it.
So Chris, I know, and we'll definitely talk a little bit and dig a little bit deep into Denord as we go through it. But I want to start a little bit before Denord. And the Denord story itself, actually, before I do go back, the Denord story I know has a lot of ties into the Minnesota area. But where are you originally from? Where did you grow up?
Mostly Minnesota. I was born
Okay.
in Indiana. So I was started in Indiana. I moved to Minnesota in 91.
Hmm.
So I was 8 when I moved to Minnesota, and I went middle school, high school, kind of all over the city.
Hmm.
But I've lived Indiana, Minnesota, California, DC, Maryland, and Louisiana. So I've been kind of all over the place, but mostly I grew up in Minnesota.
Got you. So growing up, and having, experiences literally all over the place, I'm assuming those experiences shaped and groomed you into who you are today. Thinking of from a career standpoint, again, with the podcast, really tapped into entrepreneurialism, right? But we know a lot of the journeys don't always start from an entrepreneurial perspective. What did you have ambitions of being young Chris, who's in Indiana now and in Minnesota and Maryland and DC? What were your ambitions when you were growing up? What did you want to be when you grew up, Chris?
Well, it depends. A lot of different things. It shifted over time.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I just assumed that I was going to be president of the United States. And I just thought, of course I'm gonna do that. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And that probably had a little bit to do with why I would later get involved in politics and do some
Mm,
of that, learn enough about it to realize I didn't want to be elected to anything.
mm,
Yeah, but then come high school, and around that time, I started having this idea that I wanted to be a business owner for somewhat odd reasons. Um, I grew up, and you're going to get a lot of this. So you're going to
mm,
get a longer answer than you asked for. But um, when I was growing up, I was we grew up poor and in very, liberal progressive areas. And one of the things that was just like a constant refrain was, we were the people and the business owners were the enemy.
mm,
Like they didn't care about you. They did like all of this. Like they were all the enemy. And even as a kid, there was something about that didn't line up. Whenever I hear one-sided stories, there's usually something wrong about it. And so even as a kid, I was like, well, you could be a business owner and you could still be a good person. Why does and so I was wrestling with that. And in high school, I had an idea I was going to start a restaurant. And I never actually did it, but I had the name picked out. It was Montana's Ghetto Fabulous Rib Crib. And I drew up I drew up what I thought was a business plan at the time, which basically was a picture of how I wanted the outside to look. right? And I was just going to do ribs and, this is a rib crib. What else are you going to do? You can do ribs, right? The marketing does itself. But part of my idea with that is that if I ever did start up the rib crib, I wanted it to be a place that people wanted to work and have, be a good impact, right? Like I wanted to be the exception.
Mm.
And now having been out in the business community for a while, I find there are a lot of business owners who are the exception, and that we might need to just change what we understand the rule to be. Um, but yeah, I think I've everything from I want to be president of the United States, I want to open up the rib crib. I started reading John Grisham books
Mm.
like really young. I was probably 9. And so those are all lawyer books. And so I had it in my head, well, maybe I want to be a lawyer, and for I ended up doing that for a hot minute, but we get into that if you want to. But yeah, so somewhere between all of that, I was kind of all over the place.
All right, so actually, let's stay there, right? So we're in high school, and we have this immaculate, pseudo immaculate business plan for the rib crib. You end up going to law school. So what happened between opening the rib crib to I think I'll go to law school? What happened? What was that about?
A number of things. Well, first of all, college happened.
Yeah.
And I went straight from high school to college, and I shouldn't have.
Mm.
I barely got out of high school, barely. And I consider myself a smart kid, but I was not motivated for high school. And so I barely got out. The namesake of that Cafe Frida coffee liqueur, she's a big part of the reason why I got out. I was going through a number of things. I was adopted during high school. So it wasn't really where my focus was. So I barely made it out, and I got an opportunity to go to the University of Minnesota, and I took it. I probably wasn't ready for it. So when I went to college, I wasn't really interested in college. Partying was cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also interested in politics. And so instead of focusing on my schoolwork, I focused on what I was going to do on the weekend, and I focused on getting involved in political organizing. And so that political organizing would eventually take me to work for a couple, a different nonprofit that did training for electoral politics. And then from there to work, there was a guy, a state representative in Minnesota, who wanted to run for Congress. His name was Keith Ellison. So I got onto his campaign, and we were one of, I don't know, 16 candidates, but we won. And so then I went out to DC, worked in DC as a congressional aide. And when I was out there, and again, I didn't finish college, right? Like I left the U of M, might have been politely encouraged to leave the U of M. And so I still didn't have a college degree. I'm now out in DC. I'm working as a legislative aide on Capitol Hill. And that was the first time that I couldn't really talk myself out of something, out of a situation. Like some of the hard skills that I needed, I just didn't have. And, my writing was poor. And so that then became this impetus. It's like, all right, well, one, I didn't really like working on the Hill. Two, I clearly had some deficiencies that I needed to go back and figure out. And so I left that experience prompted me to go back to school. I went to the University District of Columbia. It's a historically Black college in DC, the oldest land grant university, and which nobody knows about, but that's all right. Maybe some people will hear about it here on this Go Firebirds. But I went to the University of DC and basically had to start college over. But I did my 4 years in 2 years because I just loaded up and went crazy. And at that point, I had decided, one, I'm going to turn my weaknesses into a strength. So I went back, got the English degree, did all of that, focused on technical writing, editor of the paper, et cetera, because I wanted that to be a strength. And two, I was sick of being broke.
Yeah.
And working on the Hill is a great way to stay broke because nobody makes any money out of it. DC is an expensive town. You make $28,000 a year, right? So I didn't want to be broke anymore. So at that point, I decided, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to chart a path for law school. So that's why I went back to college with one purpose. And that was the difference between high school Chris and the original try at college is now I actually knew what I was working for. And so in the second time around, straight A student, graduated top of the class, went to law school for free, presidential scholarship. But that's the same kid. So even now, like when I see some kid and he's like, oh, he's doing so great, he's so smart, he's got all these grades. I'm like, he's just motivated. It's like that other kid who's a D student might be just as smart. He's just not motivated, right? Because I certainly was that kid. But that's kind of how that winding path, the idea of starting a business at that point wasn't really germane because my understanding of it was that I needed a bunch of money to do it. And there was
Mm-hmm.
no point along that path where I ever had any. There wasn't folding money in my pocket
Mm-hmm.
at any time along that timeline. So the business idea was kind of pushed to the side.
Yeah, so I'll concur with a couple of things. So I spent most of my adult life in the DC area, and that is not the town you want to be in and be broke. Because I've been there too. So you're speaking to the converted on that one. So with this new motivation, high school Chris is now more motivated. I'm out to get mine, Chris. You finish up, you graduate early, you're in DC. I'm assuming there's an inflection point where, okay, yes, entrepreneurialism may not really be the North Star at this moment because in your mind, you need a couple of bags to make that happen, right?
Mm.
But so what did you think would be the way to get out of that broken state, if that makes sense?
Well, I made a 10-year plan, and every time I made a 10-year plan, it hasn't, I don't think I've ever made it through five. But my
Uh,
10-year plan was I'm gonna get this degree. I'm going to go to
mhm,
law school. I'm going to go to a law school that can get me the job in big law. And I'm going to go make six figures. And I'm going to do that for 10 years. And I'm going to use that to bank up some cash so that way I can go off and do what I want to do. And uh, yeah, I worked as an attorney for a couple of years. And when I started working as a attorney, actually having passed the bar, I was already working on the business plan for Denora, right? So it was,
so you threw the rig shack to the side.
I had to put the rib. I mean,
Just-
like by then I had learned a thing or two about restaurants, and apparently the best way to lose money is to open up a restaurant. So that didn't seem like what was up. But one of the things that was a little hobby that I had going on, and I
Mhm,
got into because a buddy of mine, a good friend of mine I grew up with in Minnesota,
mhm,
he got into brewing beer. And
mhm,
so and at the time, see now I don't drink beer, but then I was much more into it. And so I started brewing beer and I started getting really into it, like real serious about it. And like, I've taken the same recipe and brewed it with one little deviation several dozen times, just trying to dial in that one thing, you know. And so I was doing that. And so I had this idea like, well, I can brew a pretty good beer. It's like maybe I should start a brewery. And at the time in Minneapolis, the breweries were really blowing up. And it seemed like every weekend there was an opening and everybody would go. Like whenever a new one opens, like everybody went. So it's like, yeah, it's like maybe I should get in on this.
mhm,
But there was a little bit of a mismatch going on because the type of beer that I was into wasn't the type of beer I was seeing at all these new places. I was nervous about trying to
mhm,
do something like that and be out of sync with where it seemed like the consumer was. And a buddy of mine in agricultural law class that I was taking, so I'd have something to talk to my father-in-law about because he's a farmer.
mhm.
A buddy of mine said, well, what about distilling? And I hadn't really considered that as a potential business. I had considered it as something I was going to do in my garage, but not as an actual business that I would do legally. And so I started looking into it within, 2 weeks. I was pitching it to my wife, trying to get her on board. And then a few months after that, I had a lease on a place. So we went fast forward, which I
So
wouldn't recommend, by the way.
yeah.
Like I don't, I'll tell my story, but almost everything about it, I would say this could be done better, right? And if I had it to do again, I would do it differently.
So Chris, let me make sure I understand this correctly. So I say the term hobby loosely because it wasn't even a hobby at this point because it seems like you were learning it and then fast forward, let's go do it.
Mhm.
So you're full time in the legal profession. You're learning distillation. You're like, you know what? Let me do something. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, so I had the bug coming out of law school,
Yeah.
and um, but again, I didn't really know I could brew beer, and I could
Yeah.
brew a few good beers.
Okay.
But I didn't know how to distill,
Of course.
right? I love the science of it though. And it was interesting to me. It was stimulating to me. And so I was trying to learn how to do that. At the same time, I had already made the decision that I was going to start a distillery. I just didn't know how to
Got
distill.
you.
And
Got you.
so I was over the summer, I was making all kinds of weird things in my garage, right? Anything I could find, that was available to me, making sugar wash with tomato paste in it for yeast
Mm,
nutrient, like doing all kinds of stuff, right? I distilled off cream of wheat once upon a time just to see if, because we had a multi-meal factory in just south of the Twin Cities. Like maybe I could use a waste product or something like
mm.
that. If anyone's wondering, it doesn't taste great. Um, so yeah, I was experimenting. I was trying out different things, and I also took a trip. I went around, kind of left from Minnesota, went west,
Mhm.
and checked out a lot of distilleries. Popped my head into a whole bunch of different places, and had a lot of people take me in and show me exactly what they were doing. Right. As soon as I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," people were like, "Oh, okay. Here, I'll show you all my secrets." So I had a lot of help from people who were willing to share their knowledge with me.
So were you thinking, Chris, that eventually this could become like this becomes my goal is to run this business? You said you had the framework for Denor, or at least the beginnings of the framework for Denor already prior to this. So were you already thinking of, doing this and letting this become who you morph into, Chris, the spirits guy? Was that the thinking, or was it always going to be something like a side hustle, but let's see where it goes. Let's see where it takes me.
I think I wanted it to be the thing that I did
Mm-hmm.
because part of the reason why I was excited about jumping in is because of what I'd be jumping out of.
Mm.
And the legal industry, what didn't look like one that was going to be conducive to me being the kind of dad that I wanted to be. So I mentioned earlier I was adopted when I was 14. So I didn't get a dad until I was 14. So those first 14 years, I was with single mom, and I had always kind of wanted to be the dad that I had wanted to have. And one of the most important things about that is being present. And so looking at the legal profession and thinking, well, I'm going to work hard in whatever I do. There is no way to not work hard. So I'm going to work hard in whatever I do. But here I'm at other people's whims. And I'm looking at the people around me and I don't see a lot of happy people. And so I'm not going to be at the same time that I'm starting this off. I know that my first son's about to be born.
Mm.
So I'm, dealing with that and seeing I don't believe that I have a real future here. And that 10-year plan starts to look bad when I think about that's 10 years of my son's life, right? So I can't just skip 10 years of his life. It would be the most important 10 years. So I knew that I wanted to get of the out of law. And it was just a question of how I was going to do it. And originally I did both. I was a lawyer by day and I distilled at night and I basically slept at the distillery. So 6 out of 7 nights I would be at the distillery because I'd go right from the law firm, take off my jacket, put on the coveralls, start grinding corn and watching that still slowly pour out booze, right? Um, and that worked fine for a while because we had a brand new baby. And
Mhm.
that baby didn't really want dad. That
Mhm.
baby wanted mom. And dad was not relevant, right? But when he started moving around and when I would come home and open the door and you would just hear him from the other side of the room, it just scream daddy and come running up. Then I was like, he knows when I'm not here. And so that was really the fire to get the business going was you need to make a change in your life so that way you can choose your schedule and be present for the things you need to be present for.
What was your wife's thinking around this time? Because I can only imagine, like your wife sounds like a very supportive person, and I have one as well. So it's always great to have someone like that. But sometimes you're like, goodness, is my support going to run out at some point? Because she's like, yeah, do what you got to do. And this is the sixth night that I've slept at the distillery. How does she take this all in?
Well, yes, I would say she was very supportive. She was also involved,
Hmm.
right? So when we started, it was, she was helping out too. And so in those early, like it was just what we needed to do. And I told her, I said, I need you to give me 5 years. Like I need 5 hard years. If you give me 5 hard years, then I can build this thing. But the only way I'm gonna be able to build it is with those 5 hard years because we don't have the money. We started with $60,000. That's not enough money to start up a distillery. It's like the only way that we're gonna be able to do this is I'm gonna grind this, and I'll do that. It's like, but there are going to be impacts, and that one of those impacts. And I thought this is again me making plans that I wasn't able to live up to because I thought I could do those 5 hard years. One again, a year into it, when that baby boy is yelling for you, you realize you need to adjust some things. Um, but yeah, she was incredibly supportive and remains so to this day. I mean, keep in mind, there's one, she had dealt with me through law school
Hmm.
where I basically was like, I'm not talking to anybody. I lived in books, right? That's all I did. I wasn't very fun. And then, we start this business, and then boom, I'm right into another thing where so she's got this absentee husband. And then I say, hey, I finally started making some money, right? This broke dude that you've put up with at this point for 8 years or so, I'm finally making some money as a lawyer, and I want to leave that, right? I've been broke my whole life, making six figures, and I want to leave that to go do this thing that doesn't make any money and actually loses money. And that I think was you want to talk about the ultimate sign of support because that means she has to be the primary breadwinner. She has less flexibility in what she's going to do. She has less flexibility because of the time that she's going to have because she knows the time it takes because it's a one-man show in there, right? And she said yes. And that's why you know, I am forever. I mean, I love my wife as well. You should, right? But I'm forever indebted to her and grateful to her because she has allowed me to pursue my dream. And in so doing, I know I'm a happier person today than I would have been if I was grinding it out, for a paycheck in any job, really. So yes, it definitely takes a team,
Yeah,
right?
there's no fail with that level of support. So, like, people don't understand it sometimes, but when you know that the core person in your life basically said, "I got you," it opens it just does wonders for you. So, yeah, what's interesting, Chris, is you said something about starting up. And for those who are interested in getting into this business, who may not, who just kicking the tire down the road a bit, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And I'm not trying to scare them off saying, you have to be a gazillionaire to start, but it's also not cheap. How did you like? I'm assuming you probably had to be savvy. Even with the 60,000, I'm pretty sure a lot of that was sweat equity connected with that 60,000. Looking for deals. How did you navigate even getting started? Understanding where you were at financially and everything else.
Um, a lot of arrogance and being naive. Um, and so if you back up a little bit, so
Hmm.
I put together this idea of how we're going to do this distillery. It's going to be small. I didn't think we needed too much money, but I was going to looking at equipment and all that. And it became very clear that we weren't going to be able to do this the way that other people were doing it, coming out and spending millions of dollars. We don't come from, neither my wife nor I come from deep pockets. Um, and so we had to approach it a different way. So in my head, it was like, well, I'll outwork anybody. That's where the arrogance comes in, right? And I also thought that if I just created the best product possible, that it would basically sell itself. That's where the naivete comes in. And those two things got me in to the industry. And then once I was in it, like we were in it. I left a good paying job. So there was no fail. Like this had to work. And so we had to do whatever needed to be done to make it work. at that time in Minnesota, all you could do was produce. So as a producer, I could produce it and I had to sell it to a distributor who could sell it to a retailer. We didn't have cocktail rooms, anything like that. We realized real quick that we weren't going to be able to survive that way. And so we started lobbying. We formed the first Minnesota Distillers Guild. My wife was the first president of that, and she spent half her time holding the baby up there advocating to get the laws changed so we could open up a cocktail room. Minnesota has cocktail rooms today because of what that woman did. And that cocktail room saved our business because we learned real fast that the big guys had control of the market. And, we weren't going to be able to break in the way we thought. That idea of, oh, if I make good juice, everyone will just buy it and it'll take care of itself. Well, that apparently is not how it worked. And so the cocktail room became our business. And so we pivoted. And so we went from, we were just going to be about manufacturing and sending it off to now we run a bar, right? It's on the other side of the distillery. We run this bar. So that was pivot number one. We would later in 2020 pivot to hand sanitizer. And then after that, we'd pivot to doing another thing. So I think one of the lessons for me was, again, it's Darwinism, right? It's not the strongest, it's the most adaptable to change. And for us, we had to adapt to change. And in a couple of places, we had to make the change that we wanted to see. We had to go change the law so we could survive, right? But starting like that with no money, you're behind the eight ball. I mean, you're one mistake away from everything falling apart all of the time. And it's again why I don't recommend it. I mean, I've got way more gray hair than basically all of my friends, and some of that's the three boys, but not all of it. I mean, some of this I earned grinding corn at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Man. What would you say was your first win? Like when or what would you say was your first win to let you know, like, okay, I made the right decision?
Two things. The first one was seeing the bottle on the shelf. The first time I saw a bottle on the shelf, because I could look at that bottle, I bottled that, I distilled that, I ground that corn, I fermented it, I did everything. We had an old apple press that we used to squeeze out the juice and the mash, right? Like we did all of that. So I knew everything that went into that bottle. And so to see it on the shelf in a liquor store and to say, I made that, right? And I slapped that label on. That's why it's a little crooked, but like I made that product. I mean, that was special. And I've never had anything of mine that was out in the world like that. And I didn't know how prideful that was going to make me. The other thing that had happened actually before that is I had taken the vodka that I was making and I went out again, took another trip out west, and I just wanted people to try it. And I also was trying to learn how to make gin because I had been instructed by my wife that I needed to make gin now. And so I was going and I took this vodka and I took it to a place in Montana, Head Frame Spirits. And Courtney and John McKee owned it at the time. And I walked in there and I was like, hey, I'm new distiller and I've got this vodka. It tastes a little different than other vodkas. And I'm not really sure if I'm on the right track. And John McKee dropped everything he was doing. He's got a whole distillery running. He was like, oh, you're another distiller, dropped everything he was doing. And he took me in and he tried it. And he was like, you know what? I think you got something special here. And so that for me there was an actual operating distiller who tried something that I made. And I have massive imposter syndrome, like everybody else I've talked to who gets into this industry. And I'm like, can I even do this? And so to have a established distiller, and I mean, I think they'd been open for a couple of years, but to me, they were an established distillery. To have him say, I think you got something here, like that gave me all the confidence that I needed to say, all right, I can do this.
Do you believe that you have something now? And let me actually take this to get a little deep into this, right? Because you said something that really resonated with me, because I was the king of imposter syndrome for a long time. Survivor's remorse, imposter syndrome, all of it. And I'm also trying to get better with that, because I do believe words are powerful and speaking things into existence is key. And I remember listening to a post that Fawn Weaver did recently, like within the last couple of weeks ago, and she talked about imposter syndrome. And she said, I do not have imposter syndrome. I am meant to be here. And my, what I have built is kind of it's a blessing. You know what I mean? She
Mm.
said it way more eloquently than I could ever do. But it made me think. I'm like, I need to stop saying, even touching upon imposter syndrome, because even though I know I'm supposed to be here, I don't want to even speak into existence that I was never at a point where I didn't think I should be here. So, along soliloquy to say to you, do you believe you are in the right space now, and did you definitely belong here, or do you still have touches of that imposter syndrome?
Oh, I still have touches of imposter syndrome. I absolutely do. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I completely do. I think that, you know, I think that there is a general myth, and that there are these exceptional and special people
Mm-hmm.
who go around the world doing exceptional and special things. And business owners, presidents, that we say, oh, but they are exceptional and special. And that's why they were able to do the thing that they are doing right now, which is another way of saying they were essentially predestined to
Mm.
do what they are doing right now. And I don't believe in that. I've met a lot of interesting people. I've met US presidents, I've met business owners, and I have never met a special person in my life. Not one, right? I've met unique people and I've met extraordinary people, but I've never met a special one. So far as I can tell, people are just people. And the difference between the ones who become a US president or start a successful business or start an unsuccessful business is simply that they did it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There's nothing else to it. And so I don't feel like I am in any way, shape, or form a special person who was predestined to jump into this industry and be successful in it. I think that I'm an ordinary person who just did it. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw, and it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying because the imposter syndrome comes from the understanding, in my case, and this is why it's a little bit different, which is why I'm perfectly fine with imposter syndrome, because my understanding is that there are no special people. I have confidence and sometimes a little too much, right? But I don't believe that I'm special, which means I can fail. And so when I go into everything, I believe I can fail. And so I better be read up. I better work hard. I bet like it's not a given that I'm just chosen and anointed to succeed. And that's what keeps me working.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's a good thing. The piece that I want people to understand, where the imposter syndrome thing goes to the other side, is where it becomes an impediment to just doing it.
Yeah.
Because that's the difference. Obama's president because he ran. Like that's the difference. He's a smart guy, but I've met a lot of smart people,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of other people who could have been president, but they didn't run. He did. So, I started Denord. There were 100,000 other people who could have and didn't. And had they'd be talking to you right now, not me. So for people who are, kicking the tires, and I scared lots of people off from starting distilleries. Starting a brand, that's one thing. Starting a distillery is a completely different thing. Scare a lot of people off from that. But, I'm also here to say, look, I'll help you. Because if you're actually going to take the jump and you're going to make it happen, then for all I know, you are the next phenom, right? And somebody helped me. That John McKee, he tried my stuff and he said, yeah, you got something here. When I went to Spirit Hound Distillery in Colorado and he let me see how they made gin, he helped me. So I'll help you, right? But I think a little bit of imposter syndrome can be good for you if it comes from the right place.
And I mean, I love your perspective and how you take on challenges, if you will, even if it's internal challenges. When you think about the North, so we talked about the win, what was that special moment? What do you think has been the largest or the biggest challenge that you faced as an entrepreneur during this journey, to date with the brand?
Uh, That's tough. There's a couple that come to mind, in different avenues. One is kind of the obvious of anyone who survived through 2020 and COVID. And COVID took out a lot of distilleries.
Yeah.
And some of the distilleries that COVID took out, it didn't start taking them out until now, actually. But it's the hangover that's left over. You can trace the beginning of the end for a lot of shops back to 2020. And that was a massive challenge because overnight we stopped being a distillery. And overnight we thought that was it. That was the end. And we had to pivot. And that was a tough transition. There were, it was very difficult as someone who had always wanted to be a good business owner, which is measured by how the people who work with you, view you. It was very difficult to tell people, listen, we've got to shut this thing down. And I know this is how you make your money, but I can't have this place be open. That was tough, and the pivot was tough. And in the end, it worked out. And as is often the case, the things that are tough are also the things that teach you. And we learned a lot. We learned that some of our impulses were not just business liabilities, but actually good for business. That impulse towards, we're going to do this thing that doesn't make any sense as far as the bottom line, but it makes a lot of sense vis-a-vis our community. Those moves, like pivoting to hand sanitizer and giving it away, is the last thing we're going to do so we can make a positive impact, which then led to people saying, oh, well, we'll buy it from you, which then led to us having, ironically, the most successful year in Denord's history, right? That wasn't my master plan. It worked out that way. But so we learned we should lean in to that piece of us, right? And I don't know that we would have learned it as well or as fast if 2020 hadn't happened. That was difficult. That was more about external things and our reaction to external things. We had a particularly challenging experience with a union. And, growing up, and again, I've worked in Democratic politics, and unions are kind of the third rail, right? You can never say anything bad. We had folks in our production decide that they wanted to start a union, and we said, okay, and we voluntarily recognized it. And it turned into a nightmare. And I had my entire perception of unions was changed. But the main way that it tore us up is it split the distillery. And we suddenly had a dynamic we had never had before. We had this us and them thing. And you'll never hear me say that anybody works for me, because they don't, and nobody does. They work for themselves, right? We have the opportunity to work together. But if I stop paying them tomorrow, they won't be there. They work for themselves, right? But we had, and now again, have a very cohesive group. And it was an internal challenge that we had never had to deal with before. All of a sudden, we've got, antagonistic, shots and barbs being thrown across in ways that we never thought was going to happen. And we have this external third party who's instigating a lot of fights between us. And we never saw that coming. And so it's one of those things where it's the thing that you think about the least, that you think, oh, this is in my backyard, I'm not worried about it. When that goes wrong, everything falls apart. Now, the lesson that I learned from that was the foundation of our success. The reason why is our people. And I always knew that, but you cannot take that for granted. And so most of my job today, because I'm not the head distiller anymore. Like, I feel like most of my job today is to keep Denord culturally Denord, and to remind people that we can do some of these inefficient things just for the sake of our interpersonal relationships. Because if those fall apart, and if we get into a place where we've got the infighting, we could have the best juice in the world, best marketing in the world. If the company pulls itself apart, none of it's going to matter. Right. And so that was a very hard lesson. I'd say it's probably the most difficult thing that I've had to do. I mean, we dealt with our place getting set on fire. We dealt with, COVID and hand sanitizer and all that. But I'd probably say the most difficult thing was having our shop split from the inside out.
Man, that is horrifying, but it's somewhat not, and this may sound crazy, but there's a level of gratification having to go through that, learn your strength, learn how to maneuver, and how to still win, whatever win looks like, in spite of those things. So the lesson and the journey sometimes can be as important as the end destination or the end point. It sounds like you guys really have a strong commitment to values and to doing things the right way. And in addition, I mean, I'd be remiss if we don't talk about the brand itself, right? That is the culmination of those values and things. Tell us about the Nord. Where does the name come from? What is the different variations of the brand I have here? Thank you to your team. This is the apple liqueur. Tell us about the product.
Yeah, so the name comes from, again, going back to 2013. We have no money, but there's a very strong, and I think across the country, there was a very strong local vor movement. People were trying to do all things local, local, local. And so we thought the only way we're going to survive, we made two guesses, right? The only way we're going to survive is if, one, we look like a distillery, meaning, and to me, that meant it's got to be an older looking bottle, you know, kind of 1920s, all of this. And two, if people know that we're local. Mm-hmm. And so the bottle that you have now are not the way our bottles used to look. And so we started off with this tall white bottle with, you know, again, 1920s apothecary kind of looking label on it. And the name Du Nord comes from the Minnesota state motto, because we really doubled down on everything was Minnesota, Minnesota, Minnesota. And so this Minnesota state motto is L'Etoile du Nord. Our first product was L'Etoile du Nord vodka, and the distillery was Du Nord Craft Spirits. Later, when we hit 2020, a lesson I had learned actually back at UDC in college, one of the most important lessons I've ever learned from anyone, from a professor there, who ostensibly was teaching Shakespeare, but really was trying to teach about life. And he had talked about, we were discussing a comedy of errors. He's like, well, the real interesting thing here is that these people don't actually know who they are. And do you know who you are? Or are you, in fact, just a reflection of the people around you and their interests, right? And so you take that forward, and then we're looking at our bottle, like, we're not a brand that's about the past. We're not a brand that, you know, we weren't around in 1920s. And if I had tried to be, I would not have been allowed to be as a person of color. Like, that's not who we really are. So we went through a rebrand. We changed some of the names. And so that's why, you know, we now have, it used to be Apple du Nord. It's now pronounced Apple. Fitzgerald, which was a call to F. Scott Fitzgerald from St. Paul, changed to Prominence Gin. But the way we make it, that all stayed the same with the exception of the vodka. We did switch to a source vodka. You know, the first thing I ever made was vodka, grain glass, painstaking. And as soon as people wanted to pay $80 a bottle for vodka, then that model would work. And I learned the hard way that wasn't about to happen. The second thing we made was that gin, and that gin's my baby. Yeah. I was still working as an attorney, and I would make I made hundreds of gins. And just every night I made a new gin. Every single night. While I was making vodka, I'd also be on a smaller still making a different batch of gin and trying it out. And I'd bring it into the law office, and I'd have people try out the gin. So I was a popular office. You come up to the 40th floor, there I am, and I've got bottle after bottle of gin. People were coming in and trying it. And so that's how I was getting my feedback on it, eventually developed that gin. The one you have, that Apple du Nord, we had actually I had said, it's like, I don't need to make liqueurs. And I was like, maybe I'm gonna make this one, because we just like apple pie, right? Yeah. The spirit. I was like, I want it to taste a little less fake, you know? And so we don't do any artificial additives, nothing like that. Everything is in there. So if you look at that bottle, it settles out a little bit. That's because it's real, right? Shake it up. And so, yeah, so we did that. We went out and we found the cider that we wanted, which, you know, we had to make some adjustments so we could get stuff that actually was tart and not just overly sweet and full of Honeycrisp and all that. And it's the best smelling day in the distillery, because you bring all that juice in and you make hundreds of gallons of hot apple cider and the whole place smells like apple. I mean, it's It's great. So we made that. The other liqueur that we have, which I see you also have, was our coffee.
Yes, yes.
That's Cafe Frida. And now it has always been Cafe Frida through the rebrand and everything. So the one thing that we cannot change is Cafe Frida. And the reason for that is it's named after a woman. Her name's Louise Borman, but she was a teacher at Minneapolis South. And she wasn't that comfortable with people, calling her by her first name. And so she came up with a compromise with some students long before me to say, well, you can call me Frida. And so we all called her Frida. And Frida is a big reason why I made it out of high school. She put a lot of extra time in on me, and a lot of teachers do that work. And that's why we dedicate that spirit to her. It's why in our cocktail room, it's only people we gave discounts to were teachers. And as we open up a restaurant in the future, which we are doing, same deal. We always let it be happy hour for teachers. But that was 2 years of R&D to get that coffee liqueur right. And because again, if you're going to name it after Frida, it's got to come correct, right? So yeah, and then the mixed blood, which mixed blood whiskey, that was a product. Again, transparency is a big deal to us, and we wanted to call it mixed blood because it wasn't all of our juice. And so we had some of ours in there, and we also were sourcing, because we had a very high rye, small barrel whiskey. It was kind of a punch in the face. And if you like that, that's great. But we didn't have enough of it. We wanted to spread it out and make it a little more tame. And so we blended it with some sweeter bourbons. And so we ended up with this blended bourbon that is mixed blood whiskey. And that to me is a lot of products. I got a lot of friends who are pushing out 40 products, and I say, more power to you, but we want to, everything we make, we have to believe is the best out there. And I can't make 40 products and believe that they're all the best in their category, but these I do believe in.
You've done you and your team have done a fantastic job. I can't wait to crack some of these bottles open. Chris, there's a little game I love to play when I talk to different founders, and it's called Here's One of My Favorites. And as the name would imply, it's a series of different questions and different themes. And we're looking for one of your favorites. It doesn't have to be your absolute favorite. So I'm not going to ask you who's your favorite child, but here's one of my favorites. Here is one of my favorite business leaders.
Probably Richard Branson. I think if there's a why that's implied in that statement, then it's another guy who looked at, he's a disruptor. He looked at industries and thought of ways that they could be done differently and more focused on people. I think that from his brands, that seems to be where his focus is how could I take this thing that is otherwise impersonal and make it more personal? And whether that's a airline or a record shop. And, I appreciate that.
Here's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, that's tough. That's real tough. It's an obscure pick, but one of my favorite movies. I spent a lot of time. I had 2 movies at the distillery, and so I just watched them on loop, which was Snatch and Big Lebowski, right? So I like both of those movies, but one of my favorite movies of all time is a movie called Fear of a Black Hat, and it's a parody, like Spinal Tap is a parody of like a movie about rock and roll guys. Like this is a parody about a hip hop group, and it's Fear of a Black Hat. So if you haven't run across that, I highly recommend you get out and check it out.
I think I have. And The Big Lebowski is one of my favorites too, man. So I haven't thought about that movie forever, but I think I've seen both. But I've seen both of them actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's one of my favorite songs.
Gravel Pit, Wu-Tang Clan.
I see the shirt. I was gonna ask. I was gonna say that, but I see the shirt. Look. I see the top. I see the top. I see the top of the crescent of the.
Yeah.
Of the
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a story, a Wu-Tang story for another day. But I drove them around, some of them around for a concert many moons ago. It was Crazy
What do you
story.
got?
We'll save it for another day.
All right, all right.
Here's one of my favorite places to travel.
Hmm. It's funny because I live there now. Right? I mean, I used to love coming to New Orleans when I was coming out here,
Mm.
and that's why I live here now. So traveling out of here, I that is this is a cop out answer. It's a really tough one for me because it's not. I've never been an aesthetic person. Like you put mountains in front of me, it's about the same as me looking at a regular building, right?
Hmm.
Like that's not really my thing. It's always been about the people that I'm there with. And so if I can travel anywhere with my wife and we can have time just the two of us, then that's where I want to be. And otherwise, I kind of want to be here because I don't like traveling. One of my commitments this year is to not make diamond status on Delta because I every time the moment I leave home, I want to come home, right? I've got these three boys that I put all this time and effort into. That's what I want to do, right? So yeah, travel for me is usually a kind of a negative. Um, but I did take a trip to St. Kitts once that was amazing. But again, part of what made it amazing is I was out there with my wife.
When you do have time to get centered and breathe and relax, or at least try to relax, what is one of your favorite things to do to take you there, to get you there into that space?
Mm. Believe it or not, the most relaxed I am is probably playing rugby.
Okay.
I got into when I was in Minnesota, I played hockey, largely because I realized I was getting a little bulky, needed to get out and carve some of the bacon off my back. So I needed to play something. So I started playing hockey out there. But I started playing rugby when I was in DC and loved the game. It's a rough game. It's not a tickling contest, but it's at the same time, it's good people, and you need that physical outlet, right? And so if you can run around and, hit and get hit for 80 minutes with no stopping, uh, that just centers me. And I know that probably sounds odd, but no, I love it. That's probably the most chill I am is right after a rugby game. Not before it, but right after a rugby game.
Man, one of my first jobs out of undergrad was with 3M. I was living in Missouri, and my apartment building where I was living, it was a husband and wife that lived right below me. Real cool guy, and he used to play rugby. He used to always try to convince me to go play rugby. And he had a metal plate in his head from playing rugby. I said, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I'm like, if anybody else would have asked me, maybe I would have, but you telling me the story about how you got hit in your head and now you got this metal plate and you asked me to go play rugby, I think I'm a pass on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but look, I'm walking. I got a grade 3 sprain on my ankle, and that was from just stepping on a sidewalk wrong.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So I'm like, hey, you get hurt doing anything, so you
Yeah,
might as
that's
well
true.
have fun.
I know the theme of Minnesota kind of shows up quite frequently through the North. What is one of your favorite things about Minnesota?
I mean, Minnesota. I don't live there anymore, but one, I think the people, like growing up in the Twin Cities, um, it's odd because in some ways that's also why I left, but it's also why I like it.
Hmm.
Um, you can be Minnesotans are notoriously for people who are not from there can be cold, and that's not I'm not attempting a pun here
Yeah.
on geography, but they can be a little cold. Uh, but if you are stranded on the side of the road or in the country or in the city or whatever, you get your car stuck in a foot of snow, the next car by will stop and dig you out and not ask any questions. And wouldn't take if you tried to give them $1 or 100, they wouldn't take it. Right. I mean, there is an understanding in Minnesota that you do have a responsibility to the people around you.
Mm.
And that's ingrained in at least in the culture that I grew up in the Twin Cities, is that we are not these rugged individuals who are expected to just go off and do it's like, yes, you do you,
Mhm.
And that's all good. But there are times when you need to think not just of yourself, but you need to think of the collective, because it takes the collective to do, particular things. And so that's some of that is just out of necessity. You live in a place where the climate's trying to kill you. And, you stop and you pull, I don't know how many times, this guy drove a big truck. Like, I don't know how many times I've pulled random people out of, in their Prius, pulled them out of, some ditch or something like that. But one of these days it's going to be you who's going to be stuck over on the side of the road. And so, you don't do it thinking that, you're just putting the karma into the world. You do it because that's what you're supposed to do. And I like that about, and I haven't I've lived all over the country, but that's where I see that the most. I've met nicer people, I've met warmer people, but I've never lived anywhere else where people had that kind of commitment and just intrinsic understanding that their welfare is tied to the welfare of somebody else that they may not know yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I shared this story with you before or not, but initially when you said cold, I thought you were talking about the actual temperature because Chris, as I mentioned, my first job out of undergrad was 3M. So,
Mhm.
3M is based in Minnesota. So I remember, I never forget, we flew into Minneapolis and I was going to be there for a month. First time ever. Well, yes, it was my first time ever in Minnesota, and it was cold, but they were like, it's going to snow the next day. I've never in my life ever experienced anything like this. Landed, not a snowflake in sight. Went to
Mhm.
the hotel, had a good time, woke up the next morning. Chris, there was 4 feet of snow outside. Not, not, not 4 inches. There was 4 feet of snow. I'm like, how does snow, number one, how does snow accumulate that fast? And number
Mhm.
two, why in the world isn't this city shut down? Because any other place would. We ended up going to the offices.
Yeah.
Second first for me. First time I ever saw snowmobiles on the highway. I'm like, oh my god. And so yeah, it's cold,
Yeah.
but we had a good time. We had a good time.
Well, so every Minnesotan who will hear that story will be like, oh, but at least it wasn't that cold. Because a Minnesotan would say it, because we talk about when it's too cold to snow,
Yeah.
right? So if you get accumulation snow like that, that's wet snow. And
Mm,
wet snow happens when it's warmer, right? And so most Minnesotans would hear that story and think, oh, well, at least the temperature wasn't too bad.
man.
Like that's what happens when you get raised in a place like that. Like
Yeah.
crazy stops being crazy to you sometimes.
So Minnesotans, I love you, but I'm gonna love you from a distance. That was
Yeah.
cold. Last question around this is here is one of the here's one of my favorite things about myself.
My favorite thing about myself. Um, I think that it is not something I started with, but I have learned the value of perspective, and um, I I appreciate I consider that if I have a superpower, that's probably it.
Yeah.
And growing up, was had single parent mother in Indiana, moved up to Minnesota, but when we moved to Minnesota, we lived with the native community, right? And so I went to an all native school. There was the American Indian movement had a basically a policing program. So that way they got there before the cops got there. If the cops got there, they're going to beat everybody up. It's called AIM
Hmm.
Patrol. So 10-year-old Chris was in the back of the car rolling around on AIM Patrol at night, trying to get to, calls before the police got there, and, big Indian dudes. Um, that gave me a different perspective. We were going to powwows and sundances as a
Mm.
kid, right? And so I was, had my life in Indiana down there, had a funny accent, which I've, lost. That got beat out of me, literally. But
Mm.
um, then coming up doing that with AIM Patrol later, adopted into a family with a Jewish dad, and so got to middle class family, got to see that perspective. And in every spot that I have been, everyone has considered themselves unique. And like, so in each group, every position, whether it was within the Black community, the Native community, I didn't really grow up in a Jewish community. I grew up with a Jewish dad. Um, everyone saw themselves as being in this unique position. It's like, oh, but life is so different for me. But I saw a thread between all of them. I was like, you all are the same people. Like, we're all the same people dealing with the same things, right? You're just coming at it from a different perspective. And that same professor who taught me that most important lesson also introduced me to the story of the blind men and the elephant, which I won't take all of the time to explain. But basically, you have a bunch of blind men who all go up and touch an elephant, and they all touch a different part, and they all swear that they know what an elephant is, and they're all wrong, right? The person who touches the leg thinks that it's like a tree. The person who touches its snout thinks it's like a snake. Someone touches a tusk says it's like a spear. They all are telling the truth, but none of them are correct. And so that difference between like, and I don't believe in objective truth outside of math, right? As I think it's really not about like, I can't, you know, I don't know what's necessarily true. All I know is my perspective. And once you believe in that, well, then the most important thing you can do is get as many perspectives as you possibly can. Our commitment to diversity at Denord is not just because I want to see more brown people. It's because I understand that it is more valuable to get the perspectives because that gets you closer to truth. And the only way that you can actually describe the elephant is you took all six blind men together and they talked about their experience. So those kind of lessons have taught me that as a guy who grew up kind of arrogant, always thought I was right, that I was that dude. I am more successful when I am able to step back and give other people space and assume that they are just as smart as I am and that their perspective is valid. So I can have my family is as left of center as, you're generally going to get. My wife's family is as red as you're going to get. But I can see that they have a point, and I can see from their perspective why that makes sense. And I think that has helped me to navigate, relationships with people, and also to temper some of my worst traits, to get myself to slow down a little bit and spend more time listening than I do talking.
Chris, your trajectory has been amazing to listen to. I mean, Denord has been doing some wonderful things. From my research, I know what you guys have done recently, even with your relationship with Delta. Congratulations to you. You've done a lot of great things. From your vantage point, have you been successful?
I think so. That's how you measure success. Uh, I measure success in impact and how I feel when I wake up and when I go to bed. And we've got a really cool group of people who I get to work with every day. And I think that they appreciate what we built. And that to me is success. I think that many people view success as whether or not you've made all the money in the world. And there are plenty of people who have made a lot more money than I have, but that I'm less concerned about. I grew up in subsidized housing, eating government cheese. I live in a house that I own. That's good enough for me. But I think that we have a reputation, and people want to be a part of Denord, and that is, I don't know the exact word for it, maybe the most flattering or the most humbling thing that anybody could say or do. Um, so yeah, I feel like I've been extremely successful, and I also feel like I've been extremely lucky.
Hmm. What what's next for you in the brand?
Um, I think that we want to grow Denord as Denord. That's what's next, and that's also the challenge. So I'm not looking for Denord to become a soulless husk of itself, but that is sold worldwide and is pulling in hundreds of millions of dollars. I need Denord to stay Denord, but I also want Denord to expand, and we are, right? I mean, in the past 4 years, you go from being in one market to being in 14. I mean, with the brand is growing and growing rapidly. and that's exciting. And I want to continue that. I'm not really looking to grow by way of adding a whole bunch of new products. Like I said, I'd rather be a master at a few things, and I use master loosely, but I'd rather be great at a few things and be okay at tons of them. So that I wouldn't look for too many new products coming from us. We may do some things that we have with the products we already have, and we've been toying around with that. And we always like to tinker around a little bit. But really, I want to take the model that we have, which is a model of a company that makes something that people don't need, right? And so it's a luxury, no matter what price point you're at. But also leave a good impression on the communities that we work in. And so I would like to see us grow the brand, and I'd also like to see us grow the impact, the Denord Foundation, and being able to make it a little easier for other entrepreneurs to follow their dreams, have a little bit of an easier path than I had. So that's what I see for us. I want to see us in all 50 states. I want us to see us internationally, and I want to see that foundation doing works in all those places.
Chris, you are doing great work. I commend you. I appreciate you for sharing your story with us. Inspiring, as I mentioned, impactful, interesting, and I mean, just a very authentic person. I really appreciate you for sharing your journey with us. So, Chris, for all those who are interested in Denord, let us know where we can find it. What are your socials, websites, all that good stuff.
Yes, you can find us at Denord Social Spirits. The Google will take you there, but we're on Instagram, Facebook, our website, DenordSocialSpirits.com. Yeah.
Good, good. So look, it's been an incredible time. Again, we appreciate you, Chris. This has been an amazing opportunity to learn a little bit more about you. Your journey has been nothing short of amazing to talk through. And, we really appreciate you spending some of your morning with us. And, I say this all the time to everyone. I'll say it again and again and again and again. Likes are great. It's great to say, well, I love this brand. I like this brand. But for brands to really hit that goal, so small brands that are looking to be bigger brands, you also have to vote with your dollars. So go out and support these brands, show up. There's some amazing brands out there, Denord being one of them. It's something that you'll enjoy, your friends, your family enjoy. Tell a friend to check out these brands, and let's help them grow to be the brands that we know they can be. Chris, I appreciate you. If anything I can ever do to support you, even above this, I'm here for you, my friend, and I just look forward to seeing great things from you.
Hey, I appreciate that. And I say the same thing both to you and to anybody else. I mean, like I said, I've probably chased a couple people off of this industry, but when people are trying to start up, we always take those calls and we always answer those questions best we can. So if you're that tire kicker, consider us a resource. Feel free to reach out.
Appreciate it. Till next time. Cheers.